So the Gutermann Cloud Services, or what we affectionately call Zone Scan Net, you are looking at the screen that everyone is familiar with. Once data gets sent up from your Zone Scan,
Eric, pause.
yep,
Sorry,
yep,
we're
okay,
still on the main screen. We're still on the
okay,
welcome screen. So just let me
okay,
know when you want me to flip over.
okay. Go ahead and flip over.
Okay. Still people coming in here. Hold on.
Okay, yeah, we got a good attendance today.
All right.
All
We
right,
flipped.
can you see the Zone Scan Net now?
They should.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, welcome. We are still getting a lot of people coming in. Fantastic. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Um, let's make some good use of the next hour or so, learning more about ZoneScan Net, how to get more out of your ZoneScan Net system, and I'm going to give you some pointers. We'll answer some questions, and we'll be better people for it when we're all through this. So what you see here is the screen that everyone's familiar with. Once data is collected out in the field from the ZoneScan 820 loggers, processed through the ZoneScan Smart app on your Android tablet or phone or other device, the data then gets sent up to ZoneScan Net, and then you log in and see the data displayed. Before we go anywhere else, before we go forward, I do get a lot of questions sometimes. In the upper right-hand corner here, if you can follow my cursor, is your username, is your password in your login account. Everyone, as we know, has a username and a project name and a username, as well as a password. Um, that project name and username doesn't change. However, you have the ability to change your password by clicking on the little key here, and ZoneScan will run you through the changed password procedure. What you need to keep in mind is if you change your password, you need to go back onto your ZoneScan Smart app and change that password in the settings on your ZoneScan Smart app. That ZoneScan Smart app, when it sends data to ZoneScan Net, uses that password, uses that project and password to appropriately place the data where it belongs in your project. And it gets into ZoneScan by using that password. So if you change the password on ZoneScan Net, you got to remember to go back into your app and change the password to match. Um, a common error that we will see is what is called the authentication error. When you get an authentication error when you're trying to send data up from ZoneScan Smart to ZoneScan Net, that authentication error means that you've got a mismatch between your username, project, or password. And most of the time, the password is spelled wrong or mistyped. As we all know, there's an encryption that occurs as you are typing your password in on the ZoneScan Smart app, and you don't see the letters that you're typing in. So take extra care to type in those passwords on your app when you do change your password on ZoneScan Net. And also, too, the first time that you log on to ZoneScan Net, for all those new customers, ZoneScan Net forces you to change that password. So this is an exercise everyone needs to go through. The first time you'll log on, ZoneScan Net will ask you to change that password. You will change that password, and then the very next step that you need to take is go back into your ZoneScan Smart app and change the password accordingly. Um, Many times when we're out training in the field with you, I will help you work through those steps, because usually with on-site training, we're sending the data up. I'm sitting right there with you, or one of our other salespersons or trainers is sitting there with you, and we help you work through that. But do keep in mind, the first time you log on to ZoneScan Net, you'll be asked to change that password, and go ahead and make that change in your app. Authentication error. Now we all know what it means, and how to solve it. So So we've now logged on. And today I want to go over. Last week we drew some pipes, we pinpointed some leaks. Today I just want to go over some fine-tune data analysis of the individual loggers and what that looks like. You'll see the logger noise tab is activated. The 4 loggers that I put out last night have appeared. Each logger has a leak score number and a leak score color, depending upon the severity of the leak score number. A low quiet logger will be green, a medium logger will be yellow, and a loud logger will be red. Um, with each accompanying logger score and color, you have an activated speaker. This speaker, because it is activated and not gray, this is telling you that you've collected your signal spectrum data last night. If you recall in previous episodes, we discussed how these loggers capture 2 types of data each night when you program them. They capture amplitude and they capture frequency. A sound wave has 2 dimensions, a height of the wave and a frequency of the wave, and these loggers are capturing both. That active speaker indicates that you have indeed captured the sound frequency, and you can click on this logger. I mean the loudspeaker, and you will get a download onto your computer. It's a WAV file, which you can then open up and through your media player actually listen to the sound that logger recorded. If you're doing lift and shift, these loggers are typically listening for about and will record about 36 seconds worth of sound wave file from the night's listening. So you'll be able to hear that 36 seconds worth of sound. Also, too, across the row, you'll see the location of the deployed logger. This is based upon the GPS plotting of the logger as it relates to Google Maps. We interface with the Google Maps here, so that is a Google Map generated location. It'll take the approximate location or the closest street address of where you deployed your logger. And of course, you can see the start time here. That is the time that you programmed to start your loggers. These loggers went off at 2 a.m., which is our typical start time. Now, to take a deeper dive into the logger, I can double click on a logger, and this opens up the individual logger's data that it captured last night. And when we're doing lift and shift, we're primarily going to be looking at the histogram and the signal spectrum. And the histogram is the amplitude of the sound that the logger captured last night. Um, that amplitude is measured in decibels. Along the x-axis here, we have 0 decibels at the very left, all the way up to above 60 decibels to the right of the x-axis. This logger last night showed primarily as it was doing its sound recording. When the logger is capturing amplitude data or decibels, it will typically be listening for a period of 1 or 2 hours. On your ZoneScan Smart app, that noise level measurement time set, that 1 hour, 2 hours, is the amount of time that you're setting and allowing the logger to collect amplitude data. How loud or how quiet the leak is. This histogram then is a generation of the sampling numbers. The Y value would be the number of times the logger woke up during that hour or 2 hour long period and recorded 25 decibels. So in this case here, you can see this logger woke up 144 times and heard 25 decibels. The spread of 1 decibel will indicate the difference between the lowest, the quietest sound heard and the most frequent sound heard. And this is indicative of a leak sound. If you think about it, a leak is going to create a sound with a very similar amplitude as it's running. A leak doesn't get really quiet and then get really loud and then stop and then get quiet and then get loud. It pretty much runs at the same loudness all the time. So this logger, if hearing a leak, should create a histogram that is picking up a very, very common amplitude range, and a very narrow amplitude range too. As you notice, no time during this night that this logger was listening did it wake up and capture a quieter sound other than 24 decibels. So this means that every time the logger woke up, it heard something around 24, 25, 26 decibels, which is a constant sound. Which is a good indicator of the presence of a leak. The signal spectrum tab then, if the histogram was looking at the amplitude, the signal spectrum tab is looking at the hertz, at the signal spectrum or the frequency. Frequency is measured in hertz, and across our x-axis, you'll see a 0 hertz at the left end, all the way up to 512 hertz, 512 hertz or so at the far end of the right end of the x-axis. And this is the hum of the leak, so to speak. It's this signal spectrum data that you hear when you click on your sound file. You can also access the sound file by the download sound file activation button on the window and download the sound file that way. But it's the signal spectrum data that ZoneScan then is going to use to do its correlation and pinpointing of the leak. This is the sound file that ZoneScan Net compares with amongst all the other loggers in your deployment to determine if there is a common similar sound or a single source sound that would indeed then be the leak. This signal spectrum allows you to have a visual representation of the hum of the leak, so to speak. And if I switch my example here, you can see you can quickly go through your signal spectrums and see what they're capturing. And one of the nice things about this again is you can also identify electric. Electricity runs makes a hum at 60 hertz, and you can visually see that. And here's a fine example of a logger that was picking up primarily, if nothing more, if nothing else, the hum of electricity. So you can see the spike on the signal spectrum is at 60, and electricity also generates harmonics, which would be frequencies of 60. So the next spike is at 120, 180, 240. So although electricity might be loud in generating an amplitude, a loudness, that a logger would pick up and hear as a loud noise when looking at the amplitude. When looking at the signal spectrum, it becomes crystal clear that that loudness is being generated by an electrical source. So the advantage of having that signal spectrum, then, you can take a look at and know right away when you see this repetitive harmonics at 60 hertz, you know right away that that logger was hearing electricity. So again, that's looking at the details of your loggers, looking at the logger noise and the signal spectrum. Another great feature of ZoneScan is the ability to print and collate and create reports. There are 3 types of reports that ZoneScan Net will allow you to create. Your reports are accessed by clicking on this little printer icon with a sheet coming out of it. When you click on it, the 3 reports are visible. The 2 reports, or the reports that you can print from the screen that you're in, are highlighted. So in this example here, I can print out my leak detection report and my logger noise report. The correlation report is not active yet, we'll get to that in a second. By clicking on a leak detection report, this allows you to amend or show what you want to show in your report by checking or unchecking the boxes. I'll leave them all checked so you can see what it shows, and you'll hit open. And you'll see your leak detection report is a printable report. Up at the top here, you have a print button. You can also save this as a PDF to email it. But this report now is a very simple, easily accessible report that shows what you just did, the area that you put your loggers out, and the results of that. So if there were any correlations, you'll see the list of correlations, the logger noise. So this basically is a great sum of the activity that you just undertook with ZoneScan, with your ZoneScan activity. Um, Reporting is becoming much more necessary with leak detection. The customers and authorities that I'm visiting are under increasing pressure to document their leak detection activities. The agencies charged with oversight of water loss are becoming a little bit more intense with their pressure on authorities to not only do some sort of leak detection activities, but of course to document it. And I know when I say, an authority or an agency coming in to take a look at your documentation, it all sends our hearts palpitating. You need not be worried. With the reporting function we have on ZoneScan.net, you have all the reports right at your fingertip for your agencies to show um, that you're doing the work. The logger noise report, again, you just click open. And this the logger noise report looks at each individual logger. You can see the map and the street view of where the logger was located, the amplitude and the signal spectrums that we just discussed, the location. So if you need to document the location of all your loggers and when they were deployed, the logger noise report will do that. Um, but I find the leak detection report is a fantastic report to give you to track what you've done. Um, this is a great report that you can print out, put in a 3-ring binder, send it off to your supervisor or your water authority board every month to show them what you're doing. It's also a great way to keep track of your field staff as they're going out in the field and deploying loggers. So you can make some performance benchmarks, and they can be charted and reported on rather easily for your field staff, and then turn around and take those reports, put them in that 3-ring binder, and send them off to your monthly water board meetings. Um, and that'll give everyone all the information that they need of all of the activity that you've been undertaking with your leak detection work. And the final report is a great report for starting your work order. You have a leak. Now that I've gone into the correlations and I've selected a correlation that we've pinpointed by drawing in our pipe, we've got the great 100% blister spot. Now I'm going to go in, and my correlation report is now active. I can click on that, hit open, and in a matter of seconds, I've now have a printable, emailable report that I can give to my field crew to go out and start doing further investigation into this leak. You can see again the map and the street view of where the leak is located, your correlation quality, the location, and then the distance of the leak. Distance L1 is the distance of the leak if you measured starting from logger 1. Distance L2 is the measurement of the leak if you started measuring from logger 2, and your total pipe length is also generated. And then you can put in your work orders, then your comment section, work orders or whatever else needs to start that whole process. So again, a real simple, easy to access access report that allows your work order and your work process to begin quickly, efficiently, and accurately. And at two, you can print these out and put that in that 3-ring binder, and you have done you've done your due diligence with recording and memorializing your leaks. So that is the printer function. The 3 reports: leak detection, correlation, and noise report. Use them good. They're wonderful reports to keep track of your work order. Very easy to generate. Um, And then finally, I do want to go over some of the finer points of the icons. I get a lot of questions of the icons and what's available on ZoneScan.net. Um, Underneath the upper left-hand corner where you're seeing the Gutermann logo, there are a couple of smaller icons that are presented. And I'll go through them real quick. The first one, if you hover over, it'll explain what it is. Zoom to fit all items. If you're doing a lot of work, or if you have a lot of loggers deployed and you're doing some detail analysis and you have your map zoomed in, and you want to zoom out to see all your loggers, you can just click the zoom to fit all items, and the map will automatically zoom out to include all the loggers in your deployed area. So you don't have to fiddle around with the plus and the minus, the zoom in and the zoom out on the Google Maps down on the lower right-hand corner to get to your loggers, to get to your full map. You can just click on that zoom to fit all items. The show map legend, if I click on that and activate it, there are some map legend colors, the blister spot, the double-headed arrows, and the single-headed arrows. Those are displayed at the bottom of the page there. You can get rid of those if you don't want to see them. The hashtag, if I activate that, you'll see it activates the 6-digit serial number underneath the logger. So each logger has a 6-digit serial number. So by clicking on the hashtag, the number icon, you can activate the logger number. And again, you can turn it off if it gets too busy. The dB symbol will give you that minimum decibel level that the logger heard last night. This refers back to the histogram that we were looking at. So above each logger will be the minimum decibel, or basically the quietness or the loudness of the leak that was heard last night. This gives you a real good indicator of how loud or quiet the logger was hearing last night. This decibel number that you see above the logger when you activate that number symbol matches the minimum noise number that is generated in your logger noise tab. Again, if that gets too busy looking at those, you can just turn it off. And then finally, I get a lot of questions on this, the drag and drop mode for map items. This, by activating this allows you to physically move the logger dots on the map. We deploy these loggers using the GPS on the ZoneScan Smart Android device. We know now and then the GPS can be a little off. And it might put your logger in a different location, slightly off from where you actually put it. By activating the drag and drop mode, you can actually take your logger and physically move it around the map now to improve its location as you deployed it out in the field. And you can do that, in any direction that you want. So I do get a lot of questions. People are out in the field, they deployed their loggers on the ZoneScan Smart app, and they realize that their logger was a block or two off. Now and then GPS can get a little crazy, and they're all worried that they don't have the ability to move that logger. You do have the ability to move that logger in the ZoneScan Smart app when you're out in the field, but now and then, in the heat of battle, you're deploying, you might miss it. All is not lost. Send the data up to ZoneScan.net, and then activate that drag and drop mode and position that logger more accurately than where you had it. And then you can use the advantages of the Google Maps, turn on your satellite, and you can almost, in many cases, actually see the valve chamber that you deployed the logger on. And that'll that'll solve your problem of any hiccups that you might have in the in the GPS satellite plotting. Um, and just remember to turn that off, because if you do still have it activated, you'll see the 4 arrows appear over the logger. You might accidentally drag and drop a logger that you want to, so just deactivate that. If you hover over the logger, those 4 arrows will disappear. And then getting on to the map, obviously the map and the satellite allow you to look at the different Google views of the map. And then finally, we have the correlations, logger noise, and custom buttons. Looking at the correlations, by having these checked on, will show you all the possible correlation outcomes, from red blister spot to medium to suppressed without pipe or double-headed arrow or out of bracket. If you have these checked off, you're going to notice that the correlations will go away. And now and then, folks will accidentally uncheck them, and they'll say, "Oh, Eric, I thought I had a leak and it's gone." Always make sure that your correlations are checked on, and you can see then how that controls the what data is displayed on ZoneScanNet. So make sure that those are on. Same with the logger noise also. If I uncheck a possible, my logger is going to disappear. So just make sure that those are checked on. Now and then, you can actually click them all on or off by clicking the box. As you can just see, I turned off all the correlations by clicking on the correlation box. I can turn them on just by clicking the same box. So I do get that a lot. Someone will accidentally click off the correlations. They'll give me a call and say, "Hey, Eric, I think I had a leak, but I'm showing no correlations." Go ahead and click. Make sure that those are activated. And then the custom has to do with how your pipes are displayed. As you can see, you'll turn your pipes on or off. So those are the correlations, logger noise, and custom buttons. Make sure that those are turned on, or understand how they turn on and off and how they affect you viewing the data on ZoneScanNet. And then finally, the beauty of Google Street View. You got a leak, you can always drag your Street View icon over to the leak and take a look at your Street View and move it around accordingly. Oh, there's our leak right there. And you can back out of your Street View just by hitting the back button there. So that is a half an hour worth of ZoneScanNet training. A lot of great features. Become familiar with them. Use those reports. Use those reports. And it's going to make your leak detection activities go way much further. At this point, Max, if there are any questions, let's open it up for some questions. Let's see what we got.
Hey, Eric. Yep. So there was one question about interpreting the data, and it was a question from Mike, and he asks if the type of pipe affects the amplitude or sound. And I actually do have a good slide to show for that, or a table, if you want to answer the question as well.
Okay. Okay. Yep. Can you put the table up?
Sure. Hold on, let me find it.
Do I need to stop share?
Not yet. Hang on one second.
Okay. I will talk about pipe material. Always a common question. How does pipe material affect my noise? How does pipe material affect my correlation? Again, these loggers work. They pinpoint leaks by having 2 or more loggers hearing the sound of the leak. Okay, here we go. As you can see with the different materials, Sound is generated in a varying frequency range. And on the chart you see here, steel will generate a sound generally between 400 and 1500 hertz. Iron 300 to 1200 hertz. And as you get down to the softer materials, down to lead, PVC, and poly, they generate a sound in a much lower hertz. Think of this as the pitch. If you take a piece of ductile iron pipe and wrap a hammer to it, it's going to make a higher ting, ting, ting sound. If you take the same hammer to a piece of PVC, it's going to make a lower thud, thud, thud sound. That is the hertz. That's the pitch that you're hearing. Um, the zone scan loggers have a hearing range that will allow them to hear those various ranges. The hertz ranges that the sound is generating is going to be captured by the logger, just like your ears can physically hear the various pitches, the low thud of plastic, the high ting of ductile iron. The loggers can hear that range also. Um, and But the most important, another function that you need to be concerned about is how well the energy sound wave is traveling down the pipe. Um, Ductile iron, steel, the sound travels very good down those brittle materials. It doesn't absorb the sound energy quite as quickly as your softer materials, your lead, PVC, and poly. So sound will travel farther on steel um, than it will on PVC. Um, so what that means in the real world is you need to put your loggers a little closer together to make sure that they're capturing that common sound when you are on plastic. So typically on plastic, we like to say 250, 300 feet apart for your loggers. On ductile iron and cast, you can put those loggers 5, 6, 7, 800 feet apart, much farther apart, because sound is traveling. It isn't being absorbed quite as much by the steel or the metal or the brittle material. Now, as your pipe diameter gets larger, there's more mass. The more mass is going to absorb the energy quicker, and you will have to put your loggers a little closer together. So when you are on a larger diameter, 24, 28-inch ductile iron, you may have to put your loggers closer together, 300-400 feet apart, in order to ensure that you're capturing a sound that is generating in the middle of that pipe. But these hertz ranges is typical of the pipe and the type of sound that they generate. This little chart is really helpful when you're out doing sounding with your ground mic and you have a ground mic such as the Aquascope 3 that has the ability to narrow down the listening hertz ranges. Our Aquascope 3 has a hearing range of 0 to 5,000 hertz, but you can knock that down into 200 hertz increments, and you can fine tune your listening to hear in the anticipated hertz range. So if you are out doing leak detection on a piece of PVC, you can dial down your filter window to the lower end of the hertz range, because you know that PVC is going to generate that lower hertz rumble sound. Good question. I hope I answered it.
All right. So Eric, go ahead and share your screen again. So
Okay.
And I'll switch over. In the meantime, we had a request for you to briefly go over how to generate a correlation report. I think that's a pretty quick one.
Okay, correlation report. I've got my loggers, I've got my data, I drew in my pipe. I have a correlation, I've got a great correlation of 100%. I can double click on here to see that classic correlation graph. I didn't go over this earlier, but here's the graph that gives you a visual representation of the loggers and the sound. The vertical black line here at the left is 0 feet, which represents logger 1. The far right black line represents the other logger, 600 or 700 feet away down the line, 650 feet away. The middle black line just represents the dead center in between the two. And then the classic blue leak vibrations, which is this very thin, narrow peak, which represents where the sound is emanating from the pipe in between those two loggers. Zone scan gives you that distance, 446 feet from logger 843, or 207 feet if you measured back from 978. So I've got a great leak. It's 100%. Again, I can access the print button from this field. I'm going to hit on print. Because I am in the correlation, it's only going to give me the correlation report option. I'm going to pick the options, the data that I want to see on my report. You can pick as few or as many as you want. Hit open, and the report is generated. At this point, I'm going to print this out, give this to my field guy, and say, go on out there and take a look. It gives him all the data that he needs to go out and do further investigation on that leak. Print this out, put that in that 3-ring binder, and you've started a decent documentation of what you just did with your leak detection activity. Good question. I hope I answered that.
Great. One more. Sam asks, if loggers, are picking up electricity, can they still find a leak?
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me go into, because what's happening is on these loggers, let me go into logger noise, let me pick out a logger, let's go into signal spectrum. Electricity, as I mentioned, hums at that 60 hertz and multiples of 60 hertz, which in the vast hearing range of these loggers, which have a hearing range of over 500 hertz, a span of 500 hertz, the electricity will make a sound at that 60 hertz. But the logger has a much wider window of sound to be sampling from to be able to hear a leak. And a leak is heard and pinpointed by having two loggers reporting back the same signal spectrum that shows a similarity in sound. So yes, the short answer is yes, these loggers can hear over electricity or through electricity and still pinpoint the leak. Simply because they've got a hearing range of over 500 hertz wide that allows them to basically ignore the 60 hertz and still have enough of the tune, of the hum of the leak to compare it with another logger and to be able to say, yes, we are hearing a similar sound here. So the beauty of the Zone Scan 820 loggers is that they will, electricity is there. It's a common sound. These loggers will hear it. They will chart it for you to show you that they're hearing it, but they can easily filter that out and hear through that leak or that electricity to still generate a very good correlation pinpoint.
Quick question. Does the Irina asks if a gas line, does that give off a hum, single frequency hum as well?
Anything will make noise. Anything that makes noise, whether that be a gas line, electricity, a pump, a PRV, passing traffic, will generate noise. And these loggers cannot and will not discriminate between noise. All they're doing is collecting all the noise. It's the Zone Scan Net software that does the spectrum analysis to compare and find that common noise. Usually, though, if a pipe does not have a leak on it, and it's a complete length of pipe, whether that be a water pipe or a gas pipe or an air pipe, it is not generating a tremendous amount of noise, if any noise at all. These loggers would not, for the most part, pick up a neighboring gas pipe. One, if the pipe is a complete length of pipe and not leaking, you're not going to be generating enough sound on the water pipe that these loggers will be hearing that. Now, on occasions, I have seen two pipes laid across each other where they are crossing, and one pipe is touching the other pipe. That will create a tremendous amount of energy and interest from your loggers as those two pipes vibrate and touch, and that will create a very specific point of origination of sound, and you may pick up these loggers may pick up a crossing pipe, which you know, you're going to go out and dig it anyway. So you found a situation where pipes should not be crossing and touching each other. Um, but yeah, for generally all those other sounds that are not being generated by the leak on the pipe, on the water pipe, it's usually not nearly enough sound to confuse these loggers into thinking that they have that they're hearing a leak on the pipe. So feel free to put your loggers out where parallel pipes are running. You can even have parallel fire service lines or a second domestic service line. Um, in most cases, these loggers are going to be focused on the pipe that they're sitting on, and won't get too much sound from a neighboring pipe.
Great. Chad asks, to get around the GPS issues in the field app, is there a way to enter a unique valve number on the where the logger is deployed?
No, you won't be able to do a manual input of a valve location on the app when you're out in the field. The app is just going to allow you to plot a dot on the map. Now, you do have the ability when you are out in the field and looking at the app and seeing the dot plotted, you do have the ability to move that dot by long pressing on it. You've got the 10 seconds to move it to a more improved location. Um, and if you're really thinking about it, that is really the level of accuracy that you need when plotting a logger out in the field, particularly if you are using pipe. If you have your if you have your GIS network uploaded onto ZoneScan.net, that discrepancy in your GPS plotting of the logger is not going to be that big of a deal, because eventually, once that logger data is sent up to, and the logger coordinates are sent up to ZoneScan, ZoneScan, as you see on my screen here, is going to attach that logger to a node on your GPS pipe, which would indeed be the exact location of your valve. So I can take this logger that you're seeing here, logger 978, and move it across Rolling Road here. And Zone Scan is still through that red line, keeping it connected to that node or that valve on my pipe. So I can have some inaccuracies in my GPS plotting when I'm out in the field. I can fine tune it a little bit when the data gets sent up to ZoneScan.net. And then I could also assign that logger to another pipe node if I feel the need to improve its location.
Great. Another question here. Josh asks, is a noise level at a logger indicative of a leak farther down the pipe if there are no other loggers to form a correlation with?
That is a good question. Yes, a high leak score logger, a logger that is reporting a high leak score is red, but is not correlating. It's not part of another correlation. Um, can be the result of um, a logger, and here's an example of that. This one is you have a logger that is a red logger. If you would have a logger that is not part of another correlation, that is a high leak score logger, but not correlating with another logger, oops, that would be indicative that that logger is sitting on a very loud valve. Or, as you say stated in your question, perhaps your other loggers are too far away, or the leak is very close to that red logger and the leak sound is not making it down to another logger to give you a correlation. A red logger like this with no correlation is still worthy of your time. 9 times out of 10, it's the valve itself that is either leaking or is generating the noise. But if you have no other correlation, that is at least going to get you out into the field and say, hey, this is worth looking at. Certainly go out to that valve, listen out on it, um, and uh, and do some further investigation that way. So yes, even though a logger may not correlate, or you may not, or a logger may be at the end of its area deployment, um, and it's not correlating, meaning that the sound of the leak is not being picked up by another logger close by or farther down the line. The logger's leak score number is almost like a fallback for you to say, hey, I'm not getting a correlation, but I am getting a loud leak score. Worthy of your time to go out and investigate that logger at that point and at that valve. Good question. Thank you.
Great. Josh asks, does the password expire? Also, if you have your water network loaded, are the distances measured along the pipe?
Okay, the password, as I mentioned earlier, when you log on to ZoneScanNet for the first time, you are asked to change your password at that point. Your password doesn't expire at that point, then you have full control over of changing your password. And again, you'll just go into the little key icon in the upper right-hand corner here, change your password, and you can change your password that way. But your password will not expire once you make that initial change. And the next question was, pipe. If you have your GIS data uploaded onto ZoneScanNet, yes, ZoneScan is reading the distances of those pipes between your plotted loggers. Um, and in order to get a correlation, ZoneScan needs to know not only the pipe material and diameter, but it needs to know the distance between the two loggers that are correlating, and that data is embedded in your GIS data, and ZoneScan will read that. Now, a point on that is, let's say you do have a correlation, and it's worthy of you printing out a report and going out in the field to investigate. You will see on your report your total pipe length of 600, in this example here, 653 feet. That is the length of pipe that your GIS is indicating in between your two loggers that are correlating. I would always print out my report, go back out into the field with a wheel, something to measure the distance between my two loggers that were creating this correlation, and to ensure that that measured distance is close to what your pipe length is showing from your GIS data. Um, if you measure and you come up with 652 feet, you're pretty darn accurate. Your leak is going to be where it's indicated here on the map. However, if you do a wheel measurement and that pipe length is considerably different, you're going to need to go back into ZoneScanNet and change that pipe distance. You can go on to your length of pipe, right click, and you can change your pipe segment lengths um, to um, to make up for that discrepancy. And if you've got multiple leg segments of pipe here, because you're on a bend or something, just change one of the the pipe segment lengths to get you more accurate representation of your wheel measurement out in the field. Once you change your pipe length on ZoneScan Net, ZoneScan will automatically recalculate the location of that leak. Go back into your correlation, print out your amended correlation report. You'll have a new pipe length, total pipe length, and your distance L1 and distance L2 are going to be slightly different too. So that is the word about pipe length. Don't always trust your GIS data. If you're only using ZoneScan Net to dig your hole, ensure that your pipe length, that the data that you're using to come up with this correlation is accurate. Your pipe length, your pipe material, your pipe diameter. Now, of course, if you're using a ground mic, you're going to go out and ground mic it, and you should be getting the leak at the spot where it's indicated on the report. It may be a foot or two to the left. And then you're, again, just generating more evidence that you're on top of the leak and that your data is correct. So that's a good question. Thank you very much.
All right, live correction. The question about the app, being able to enter specific valve numbers on the app, I get that is a not a feature currently, but that has been requested as a feature. So just
yes.
Quick clarification.
Yes, and a word about app as well as ZoneScan Net. Our fantastic team of engineers in Stuttgart are continuously making improvements to not only the app and ZoneScan Net, but we do a lot of these improvements by getting feedback from the users out in the field. I'll work with customers and they'll say, boy, Eric, it's great what it's doing here, but I wish it did this. I pay attention to that. I take those ideas back to the team, and in many cases, within a couple of weeks, that improvement is if it's a worthy improvement that makes a lot of sense and is going to help the application and the ZoneScan Net interface, we will write those improvements into ZoneScan Net. So a lot of the neat features that you see on ZoneScan Net and on the app are really, ideas from the field, from operators out in the field saying, hey, I'm doing this, but I wish it did that. So we're always open for suggestions in improving the quality of our products. And so we always welcome those ideas.
Sam again asks, can loggers pick up more than one leak between pipes or just the loudest?
In most cases, the loggers, again, remember, are just picking up sound. It's the ZoneScan Net application, the software that's doing the correlation. And yes, if there are two distinct leak sounds emanating from a length of pipe, there are times where you will get a secondary peak on your correlation graph. Now the report that is generated will be at the best peak. But if you did have a secondary peak along in your correlation, you can take your cursor and put it on top of that peak, and you can see the X value distance. So if we had in an example here where we might have had a second peak down here on the left-hand part of the graph, I could position my my cursor there, and I can see the X value would indicate how far that noise is being generated from logger number 843. In this case here, as you can see on my screen, it's 164.1 feet. So yes, second leaks are able to be visualized and tracked and actually measured with great accuracy using your correlation graph.
I have a quick question. Along those lines, recently we had a correlation that was a single-headed arrow.
Okay.
But the correlation was actually in between two loggers.
Yes. Okay. Yes, that is a good question.
Yeah, I didn't.
That's a good one.
The other one was a confusing one.
Okay. On occasion, let me see here.
Steve is actually around. Might be able to jump in if that's.
Yeah, if Steve wants to jump in.
Hang on a second. Steve,
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Steve.
Hi, guys.
introduce yourself.
I'm Steve Gillam, and I'm from the UK. I'm the product and technical support director. Used to be in the US actually, but many years now back in the UK. Yeah, no, just to quickly answer that. Yeah, you will see a single arrow which is indicating an outer bracket leak because it's within a certain distance from one of the sensors. And this is one thing we are actually going to be changing in ZoneScanNet, because we have at the moment a distance of 10 meters, which is what 30 feet roughly. So if a leak is within 30 feet of one of the sensors, it will indicate a single arrow showing that it could be an outer bracket leak. But if you actually highlight the correlation, it will show you like a blue halo where the actual measurement is. And so let's say it could be 25 feet from one of the loggers, but it's indicating a single arrow. What I always say to people when I'm doing leak detection correlation training with any of our products is that really you should, when you're doing a correlation, and let's say your distance is 500 feet between your two sensors, if there's a leak within 5% of the total distance, so in this case it would be 25 feet over a total distance of 500 feet, then it could be out of bracket, meaning that the leak could be the other side of the sensor. And so you would have to move your sensors and recorrelate if it was a real-time correlator. If it was zone scan and you've got lift and shift loggers, there may be other loggers the other side of the outer bracket, which is proving that it is the other side, or it's indicating an outer bracket coming the other way. So when you've got more sensors, you're able to clarify exactly where the leak is. But like I say, at the moment, we have a fixed distance that is going to, if it's within this distance, it's going to indicate an outer bracket. And that distance at the moment is 10 meters. I've complained about this bitterly for many, many years, and it will be changed total distance, and it is likely to be 5%. So when when you're doing long correlations, it really isn't a big deal. But when you're doing a short correlation, let's say you're doing a correlation of less than 100 feet, and the leak is let's say that the correlation total distance is 100 feet, and your leak is 30 feet from one of the sensors, it's going to indicate an outer bracket where really the leak is sort of somewhere closer to the middle, and so it just seems wrong. And so it becomes more significant when you're doing short correlations. When you've got long correlations, it's not really a big deal, but it should be a percentage rather than a fixed distance. So it's something that is going to be changed in ZoneScanNet.
Great.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, and you can see on the screen, I've show an example of a single-headed arrow correlation with the blue halo that Steve was talking about, still inside the loggers. And if you double click on the correlation, you'll see that the correlation peak is still inside that logger 978. So that is an example of a leak that's inside, but zone scan, because of the margin that Steve is just describing, you get a single-headed arrow, but you can see the blue halo is.
I mean, for future use, if users realize that they're going to be seeing a single arrow if the leak is within 30 feet of one of the sensors. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, like I say, soon that will be changed, but at the moment it's a fixed distance.
Great. Well, thank you, Steve.
Okay, no problem.
Questions are kind of drying up here, so if there's anything else you can think of.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. It's great doing this and hearing ideas. We're going to continue to do this as we're always welcome for questions. I'm always available to do one-on-one trainings or analysis of your zone scan data, if you have particular areas that you want us to look at, always feel free to give us a call. Max is going to put up a screen here in a second that will give you all the phone numbers to contact us. And there you go.
You should see it.
I do see it. Yep. And so thanks for everyone for joining us. I hope you learned a little bit more about your ZoneScan Net applications and understand the reporting function and all the great things that you can do with that. On behalf of myself and Steve Gillum and Max Ward and all the Gutermann family, thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Steve.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.